Hello there! So I wanted to start today's video with a bit of a disclaimer. I'm going to do that annoying thing where I give you a spiel about the fact that I've become a Book Depository affiliate. I've been toying with doing this for a while, but I recently started listing all the books that I speak about in videos down below, which I will be honest, I have been too lazy to do until now, but a few people said it would be quite handy to have a list just to refer to refresh their brains about the books that I've spoken about, so I've started doing that. And I kind of wanted to link all of those books to independent booksellers and things, but actually it's quite hard to find every single edition of every single book that you speak about on a sort of independent site, and it takes a long time, so I've settled for just doing Book Depository links. So for the past few months anyway, I have been linking Book Depository books down below. So I thought, do you know what, if I'm linking the Book Depository books anyway, I may as well become an affiliate. So basically that means that I'm not being paid to speak about these books in any way. You also don't have to pay me to speak about these books. It simply means that if you want to buy any of the books I speak about, if you click on the links that I put down below on each video, you then buy it like you would normally from the Book Depository for the normal price, and I get a small commission on those sales. I just thought it'd be a nice way to get a bit of pocket money, and to make it fair, I'm going to make sure that the money that I get from that, if I get any money from that, I will put straight back into buying books for this channel. Which brings me nicely on to my next point, which is the fact that I'm not going to have money to buy many books anymore, because we are moving out tomorrow as I'm filming this. By the time you're seeing this, I will have moved. It's all happened quite quickly, but it's quite exciting. So we said a long time ago that we were going to start looking for a house in January. We were just going to look for somewhere to rent. We have been waiting to save up to buy our own house, but the process and selling this house is taking a lot longer than we thought, so we're just going to move into a rental, which we, as I say, weren't going to do until January. And then we saw somewhere really nice a week and a half ago. I went to view it the day we saw it, and then by the Friday we were signing contracts, and yes, we're moving in tomorrow. So it's been a bit manic, so that's kind of why I thought it'd be nice to get a little bit of extra income to focus on books, so that I can still buy books and speak about new and interesting books with you. Which also brings me nicely on, look at me with my segues today, which also brings me nicely on to the fact that I have not read much at all this half of the month, which I'm kind of trying to fight the feelings of guilt about, but ultimately I feel okay about it because I'm well over, I think I'm like 32 books over my reading goal this year, which was 100 books, and I'm kind of happy to take it a bit easier. Also, you know, I had a lot going on. I've kind of been, you know, organising a place to live in like a week. Also, we went away last weekend for our anniversary, and yeah, there's just not been much time for reading. That said, I have got a few things read. For those of you who have been watching my other videos this month, you'll know that I've been doing Not the Normal November, which is where I pick up books that I wouldn't normally gravitate towards. I think that's also kind of to do with why I haven't been as drawn to reading at the moment. But anyway, let's get straight into it. So the first book I read in this half of the month was Ivy and Abe by Elizabeth Enfield. I have done a non-booktube review of this, which I will link down below if you want to know my thoughts in depth. Basically, I did a writing workshop, and in the afternoon of that writing workshop, we worked with Lizzie, or Elizabeth Enfield, and she was talking about this book, and she had a few copies for sale there, and it really intrigued me, so I wanted to pick it up. She was a really lovely woman as well, and also the way that she was describing this was in terms of characterization and the way that we are different people depending on who we're with or when we meet people in our lives, which I think is a really interesting little nuance in our characters that perhaps isn't always translated to fiction, and she sort of said that that's something that she was really focusing on in this book. So this basically looks at a couple called Ivy and Abe, and it's less of an ongoing book, and it's kind of just short snippets of Ivy and Abe meeting each other, but they meet each other at all different times in their lives, in all different situations, and it looks at how their relationship and how they interact with each other depending on what else is going on in their lives. So it's not always a romantic situation. Sometimes they are just childhood friends. Sometimes it will be something like Abe helps Ivy at one point by giving her money for a taxi, but their paths never really carry on merging after that. he gives her his card, but she ends up chucking it in the bin, and that's that. Sometimes there are romances between them, sometimes they're married, sometimes they're having an affair with each other, sometimes they're having affairs on each other. It's really fascinating. I have to say, I picked this for Not the Normal November purely because it's quite marketed as a kind of romance novel, and romance and happy feelings aren't normally something that I'm drawn to in books. But I have to say, this I think has probably been, apart from Undying by Michelle Faber, this has probably been the biggest success of Not the Normal November, because I really enjoyed it. And I was reading this when everything was starting to kick off with the house and everything was getting quite stressful and paperwork was coming through, and this was really lovely because, as I say, I'm not normally one to pick up something that's light and fun, and this was light and fun. It was like a blanket or snuggling down with a hot cup of tea, and it was just a real comfort in that kind of stressful period, and I was really glad to be reading this at that time. Then the next book I have to talk to you about I don't have here, because I read this very quickly to get it back to the library before we move, and that is Early Levy by Deborah Levy. This had 2 early works from Deborah Levy in it, which were Beautiful Mutants and something geography, sweetheart geography, sustainable geography, something along those lines. Obviously I don't have it here, so I can't check. This was not part of Not the Normal November, but I wanted to get it done, as I say, because I was really intrigued to read it, and I didn't want to give it back to the library before giving it a go. Now, a full disclaimer, I did not manage to finish the second story, but I'm still counting it as read because I kind of only left about 20 pages. I have rated it and etc. Now, I have never read Deborah Levy. I've got Swimming Home in Hot Milk on my shelves. I've also got her memoirs that she's brought out recently on my wish list. The Cost of Living, I think one of them's called, and something else that I can't remember. She's somebody that's been on my radar, basically, and when I saw this in the library, I thought it would be a good place to start with her, because these are her 2 earliest, kind of, they're described in the book and the introduction as novels, but they're not really. I think even saying that they're novellas would be pushing it a little bit. They're effectively just long short stories, which they were the first sort of full-length things that Deborah Levy got into print. They then went out of print until this book has brought them back into circulation. I really was blown away by Deborah Levy's writing. I think she's a phenomenal writer. The thing that I would say about this as a whole is that it ultimately fell a little bit flat. I think you have to understand that it was an early work, and there's very much, you can tell that it's an early work. You can tell that this is a writer who wants to break the boundaries and break the rules, but doesn't quite know the rules in order to break them in the first place. So it is not perfect by any means, and there are some issues with the writing on the whole. I think ultimately with the plots of these books, I couldn't really tell you what they're about. There's one that follows a Russian girl, I think she's called Lubinsky, and basically she's exiled, I think, from Moscow or something along those lines, and she ends up going on this journey and meeting all these metaphorical, symbolic guru kind of people. And then the second one, I couldn't even tell you what it was about. So ultimately, I think that Deborah Levy definitely needed to work on her plots. I'm assuming that she's done that in her later works. But yeah, so she kind of was trying to be experimental to the point of detrimental with the reader's understanding of what she was actually saying. That said, I still gave these 4 stars because the writing was phenomenal, and I will definitely be rushing to get more Deborah Levy in the future. I've taken a picture of the first page because I wanted to read to you just how beautiful this writing is. I mean, even though it's an early work and there are some issues with it, it's just phenomenal. My mother was the ice skating champion of Moscow. She danced, glided, whirled on blades of steel, pregnant with me, warm in her womb even though I was on ice. She said I was conceived on the marble slab of a war memorial, both she and my father in their Sunday best. I came into being on a pile of corpses in the bitter snows of midwinter. Afterwards they bought themselves a cone full of ponchika, doughnuts dripping with fat and sprinkled with powdered sugar, and ate them outside the Kursk railway station, suddenly shy of the passion that had made them search for each other so urgently under all those clothes. On my 5th birthday my father stole a goose. He stuffed it into the pocket of his heavy overcoat and whizzed off on his motorbike, trying to stop it from flying away with his knees. We ate it that evening, and as I put the first forkful into my mouth he tickled me under the chin and said, "This does not exist. Understand?" I did not understand. So it's just beautifully written. As I say, I'm really excited to get to the other Deborah Levys that I have. I don't know whether I would ultimately recommend this early Levy book. I think there's probably a reason that these two have gone out of print, but they definitely show you that this is somebody who has so much potential to be an amazing writer, so I'm excited for getting on with Deborah Levy. And then finally I finished on The Silkworm by Robert Galbraith, which I picked this month because I don't typically read kind of detective-y crime novels. I'm sure those of you who've been around for a while will know that I'm also kind of a bit of a rebel when it comes to J.K. Rowling. I think she's an amazing woman in terms of, I love watching author interviews with her because I find her quite inspirational as a writer, but I don't particularly think she's worth the hype, and especially the case with these. I think if they were just Robert Galbraith and nobody knew that they were J.K. Rowling, I don't think they would get half the attention that they get. But somebody I was on my favourite course with also said that the Robert Galbraith books are some of her favourites, so I wanted to pick this up. This is the second in the series, the first being The Cuckoo's Calling, which I read years and years ago now when it came out, and it was fine. But this is basically, it's following the same detective and his partner, so it's Cormoran Strike and his partner Robin, and he is basically drafted in to a case, we think just an estray husband, Owen Quinn. His wife Leonora comes to Cormoran and says that Owen always disappears, so she's not that worried, but she would like Cormoran to just check where he is. And obviously things go from there, and it doesn't end up being quite the clean-cut case that we think it'll be. Owen Quinn is a famous writer, and he's just had a new manuscript sent to his publisher, and it has caused some major ripples and gained him a lot of enemies. I would say firstly that this took me a very long time to read because it is quite a thick book. It's nearly 600 pages. I think it's that typical thing of people seem to have this real aversion to editing J.K. Rowling. I would say that the first 100 or even 160 pages of this could probably be cut down to about 50 pages, which is quite bad really. I found I was quite bored in the beginning. It takes a very long time. As I say, it's about 160 pages in before we actually get going with the story, which I don't think any other author would get away with, but anyway. Ultimately it was fine. I think it was quite fun in that it was a mystery about a book and a manuscript, and there are obviously quite a few of those around with things like Ruby Zafon writing mystery and detective novels about books, and I always hope that they're going to be good, and they always let me down. This was probably the most fun detective novel about a manuscript in a book that I have read, and I did get into it towards the end. I would still say it's kind of mediocre, and I think the reason that I generally avoid detective novels is because I find that they kind of write themselves into a corner in that, so they give you sort of potential people who could have done the crime throughout the book, and then they have the choice of either picking one of those people and it being too obvious, or picking someone that wasn't ever in the frame and it being just a bit slapdash and shoved in there for the shock factor. And I found that with this. I think the ending was as bland and disappointing as I find most detective endings, I've got to be honest. Yeah, I always find the endings a little bit lackluster, but that said, it was fine. I enjoyed it. I would have much preferred it if it was about 200 pages shorter, but there you go. I don't know that I'll be rushing to carry on with the series, but I'm glad that I gave it a go. And that was everything. It was a really short half of this month. Please let me know down below what you've been reading. I don't know when I'm going to be around next. I'm going to try and sort out my internet quite soon, but I'm pre-recording 2 videos today, so I've got 2 weeks backlogged just in case, but I don't know when I'll be around to answer comments. But please comment anyway, and I will get back to you as soon as I can. Bye.